I'm Scott L. Miller, and this is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. Today on our community, we had someone who is looking for a lower-cost place to stay long-term in the Managua area, and he ended up at an auto hotel thinking that this would be a good deal. But he's a little bit worried about leaving his possessions in his hotel room. He is still not confident in the security that we have here in Nicaragua. And, of course, the lack of violent crime here does not imply a lack of people being willing to swipe your stuff, especially if it's super valuable and you're dealing with people who are very poor or places that may have lesser security because they're just not able to afford a lot, or they're meant for lower income people. And so, yeah, there's some potential risk, but he's getting this feeling while being at an auto hotel, and I think there's something he might be missing. So we're going to talk real quickly today about what are auto hotels in Nicaragua, why they exist, and what you need to know about them as a potential expat or as a tourist who may be coming to the country, because this is not something you want to be surprised by. It's not necessarily a problem, but it will be not what you're expecting. So we're going to talk about that right after the bump. We talk quite often in our expat community about how especially North Americans, but Europeans as well, are often very confused as to what a hostel is. They're often confusing it with concepts of youth hostels and shared living or shared sleeping quarters, which is not what a hostel implies at all. Nothing about it implies shared quarters. Nothing about it implies that it's for youth or for backpackers or anything of the sort. Of course, people who are looking for those things often are looking for hostels, but hostels are simply lower cost hotels. They have fewer amenities and are designed for people on a budget. Anyone on a budget. You could be old, you could be young, you could be traveling in a group, you could be single, you might want a private room, you might want a shared room. Nothing about the term hostel implies anything other than it has limited service, it's less fancy, and it costs less. And even there, you can get relatively fancy, quite expensive places, as can be attested to by the Alhambra facility in Granada, which is relatively expensive in relation to other hotels around it. It's not expensive by any stretch, and is incredibly fancy in many ways. And so that type of thing throws people off a bit. So a lot of people just are unfamiliar with the general term hostel, because this is worldwide. This is not something unique to Nicaragua, which also surprises people. But having lived in Europe for a long time, hostels don't imply any of those things. I have used hostels as simply a lower cost way to travel through much of my adult life, sometimes with family, sometimes on my own. And lots of people, basically you're always going to use hostels if you're here in Nicaragua, with a rare exception, because many people travel on a budget, and so there's always a hostel available even when nothing else is. So lots of regions of the country, because they're really catering to very few tourists, and most of their traffic is just Nicaraguans who need to visit family or do some work or something, hostels are what they normally use. The things that are above a hostel hotel, the fancier places, the places with stars and such, are generally for foreigners or a very small 1 or 2% of the richest Nicaraguans. In general, most Nicaraguans are never going to spend their own money on a hotel. They're going to be looking at hostels if they're not just staying with family. And so that is what you see crop up normally in most places. And quite often it's someone traveling singularly, not looking for a shared sleeping space and not looking to be with backpackers or anything like that. So hopefully that helps explain hostel. In the same way, now that's a universal, right? That is worldwide. That's what hostel means. But if you are here in Nicaragua specifically, we have a thing called an auto hotel. Now, we have a similar thing in the United States, and I'm going to use an expression that'll pretty much tell you what it is right off the bat, but it's a little bit different because of a cultural difference. So let me lead with what it is, but brace yourself for why it's different and why you might want to use one, but probably not. So in the United States, we refer to these as a no-tell motel. This is a place that is generally rented by the hour, not by the night. Not that you can't rent them by the night. You can go to a no-tell motel in the United States that's advertising, 2 hours for $10 or whatever, and you can certainly rent for the night, or you can rent it permanently and move into it, right? They'll let you spend your money however you want. They're just a business. But the core of their business, the function, the thing that they're designed around, is this hourly use that we pretty much all understand. But here in Nicaragua, things are a little bit different. So let me explain why these are so important and prevalent here, whereas in the United States, they're few and far between, but we all know what they are. So an auto hotel here implies a few things. One, that auto comes from the fact that you're designed to drive into it. Normally, you're not going to see it in the middle of the city and walk in. You could, they do exist, but in general, you're going to get there by car. And the implication is that there is a mechanism, whether it's walls or curtains curtains or whatever, where you're going to drive in and almost immediately your car will be invisible from the street. If you look at any of these auto hotels, they're all designed that once you've pulled in, you can't be identified. This is to keep people from seeing license plates or whatever, that you can't look in and see a parking lot. And normally, once you're inside of them, there's going to be a big curtain or something where you can pull into a private space and they cover up your car. So even other people who are staying at the auto hotel cannot determine who you are. They can't recognize each other. You're never going to see each other. You get out of your car normally inside an enclosed space that goes directly to your room, so you're never wandering around, right? A normal hotel and hostel, you're expecting to have public spaces, whether it's the lobby or it's a dining area or a kitchen or a lounge area or a pool or something. Auto hotels are not expected to have that. They're not expected for people in one room to ever have visibility to or interactions with someone from another room and shared services. Many of them do have restaurants and such, but they will always do room service. Everything, including paying for the room, is done from the room, not from a shared space. So it's very different than what you normally think of as a hotel. And maybe this is exactly what you want. You really want to be anonymous and you just want a hotel where you can disappear. Well, these do function in that way, but that's not why they're done that way. It's not what it's intended for. So the idea here is, let's step back. In the United States, most people, even relatively young people, have their own apartments and private space that they're able to use. In Nicaragua, even married couples in my age, right, it is very common to be living with your parents or to be living with your children or both, right? That's not uncommon if you're in that married coupled age and maybe in the process of having children yourself. You may be living with family, and having personal time, intimate time alone can be a challenge, right? And it can be, younger people who are just dating or older people who are married. Like, it goes everywhere. Everybody struggles in most circles to have any kind of private space. And having friends here from all kinds of different socioeconomic backgrounds, we find this, right? Tons and tons of people live with loads of family, right? Siblings, parents, sometimes kids or nephews and nieces, often grandparents, and many times people have shared rooms. It's not just that you're sharing a house with other people. Very few people have private rooms. That's very difficult. We have loads of friends who don't have any private space of their own, and some that never have until recently. And it's like a big deal that they actually have their own tiny little space that they can call their own in some way. And they don't have enough room for anything special, just barely a bed and a dresser and just enough room to move around and get dressed. But that's as close to private space as they're going to get. And nearly everyone just has a twin bed. Like, things are quite limited here in the way that most people live day to day. So having any kind of space for meeting someone or spending time with someone, often quite difficult. And even when you have a shared room with someone, it is not uncommon to not have a door and to just have a curtain or something of the sort. So you can imagine just how much lack of privacy exists in many cases. And even many people we know who are not at the poorest levels, right? We're not talking about people who are actually struggling. We're talking about business owners and people who are multi-income homes, people who are not unemployed. No adult is unemployed in the house. You may still have a problem of not having doors even on the bathroom, just curtains on the bathroom, curtains on the shower. I've been at homes of business owners, used the shower, and had a relatively scary dog just come into the shower with me, right? I couldn't keep them out because there's no doors to the bathroom or the shower, right? Now, and little kids, of course, can just pop in. Now, adults know to honor the curtains, but animals and children do not. So it's a complicated situation here in Nicaragua because of that shared living. There's lots of benefits to it, but there's some really serious caveats as well. So as you can imagine, people from all walks of life, whether it's young people or older adults, or even those grandparents who want to get some time away together, need to go somewhere. And like we said, hotels, what we normally consider hotels, are financially out of reach of most Nicaraguans. This would be an extreme hardship to be dropping $80, $90 a night on a really fancy hotel. Now, yes, we can get some pretty nice hotels here for more like 50, but the point still stands. Now, even going to a hostel, when you want to have a private room, you're generally looking at a minimum of $15 and more likely $20 to $25. You can find situations where it's cheaper, but now you're probably traveling somewhere, right? And they're not going to be where you want to be. So even that, relatively expensive. So a lot of people turn to auto hotels. Now, because they are so popular, because essentially 90 to 95% of the population needs to use them on a regular or semi-regular basis, they are very prevalent, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So they come very, very inexpensive, where they are extremely basic and definitely pretty sketchy, and they go up to really fancy with beautiful views out over lakes or volcanoes and huge rooms with really good restaurant service, right? So you have a gamut. An auto hotel does not, like in the United States, where a no-tell motel essentially implies something very sketchy and cheap and probably not very nice. Here, it doesn't imply that it's not very nice, but it does imply you probably don't want to be staying there as someone who's on vacation. You definitely don't want to be going there with your family or leaving your possessions there. It is not that kind of place. They don't have that mentality. They're not thinking of you as a long-term customer who's bringing your stuff with you, right? They're thinking of you as someone who may be there for a few hours or may want to splurge and spend the entire night or really go out on a limb and stay for 2 nights, but you're not bringing your computers, your cameras, your travel stuff. They're not thinking of you in that way. So while they have a certain type of security and quite a bit of it, they don't necessarily have that type of security and mindset because it's just not what they're intended for. So I wouldn't recommend it in most cases. In a pinch, you have nowhere to stay and this is what you can find. Hey, that's fine. Not a problem. No reason to avoid them per se, but understanding what they are will help a lot, because otherwise they're quite confusing as to how they work, why they're there, and everything. So in most places we find nearly every market has one nearby because people don't want to travel really far to it or it defeats the purpose. It's got to be easily accessible and cheap in order to service its needs. Because if you could spend a lot of money, you wouldn't have that problem at home. You'd have a private house or at least private portions of your house, right? Those things are relatively inexpensive here. So we find them in nearly all markets where they're very cheap. And in some markets, especially like Managua, you can find quite fancy ones with lots of decorations and they get quite nice, right? And it would be interesting to do a lot of filming of different ones and show them off, but that would be awkward as well. So don't anticipate that I'm going to be making that kind of show for anyone. I'd have to go stay at a whole bunch of places for a few hours to film them, and I don't know how much they would appreciate being filmed, although as long as it's a private room, they probably are like, yeah, that's cool. But it's a weird thing in general. So before someone makes that request, not something that I'm anticipating creating. But because it doesn't get used in normal life, right? So understanding that they do exist, what they are, and how they'll help a lot with avoiding some of that confusion. So hopefully that clears it up for some people and makes your travel just a little bit easier. If you're going to be looking for a lower cost place to stay, check out hostelworld.com. That's where a lot of us use as a tool here. Of course, you can use Airbnb as well, but your selection is going to be pretty low. So certainly don't rule it out. Just be aware that most options are not going to show up on there. But Hostel World is the primary thing used here. Booking.com also works relatively well, but Booking really leans towards the hotels, so it's a lot more expat priced and expat features. Hostel World leans a lot more towards what Nicaraguans would use, and of course a lot of Nicaraguans are simply, they know the places they want to go and contact them directly on WhatsApp or whatever. That's how things tend to work, or on Facebook. Going out to Hostel World or whatever implies you're looking for an international audience and looking for payment mechanisms and such, which a lot of smaller, inexpensive places don't want to have that overhead, so they avoid that, or they don't know how to do it because they're not catering to that audience, and so their audience isn't looking on there and they're not sure how to use it. So you will have a lot of pretty decent options that aren't available through the mechanisms that you would normally assume. So things to think about when you're coming here to Nicaragua. As always, let me remind you that on Thursdays, and I remember this because this is Thursday and I'm just about to hop on the live stream, we do a live stream. We try to do it every Thursday. We miss once in a while, but we generally make it about 3 months before we miss a week, and it's a lot of fun. We go on for several hours. We spend the afternoon and evening just hanging out all together. It's a great time to talk to other people from the community live in real time. It's a great time to ask me questions in real time, where I'm able to provide feedback or ask you questions, clarification questions, so you can be like, oh, where should I stay when I come? Well, what are you looking to do? Oh, well, I want to do this. Okay, what kind of weather do you like? Okay, what time of year are you coming? Okay, great. And like narrow things down. There's a lot of that. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to connect as an audience and a community together, and of course hop on our WhatsApp expat group. A link is in the show notes, as is information on how to contact me, how to send in videos of yourself with questions, and of course get in the comments, say hello, ask questions there. Happy to answer those. Always love it when we have audience questions to respond to. And as always, if you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. Comes directly to me, helps support the channel. It's like Patreon, and helps pay for all the cameras and stuff that we have to use to be able to put this show out. It really does just help cover the cost. We're not making anything here, but we're happy to do it. And we don't sell anything here, which is very important, and a topic we're going to be talking about soon, because someone asked about why we're not promoting our own properties and businesses here, and I do have a good answer for that. So we're going to be doing that on an upcoming video to explain that. And other than that, I will see all of you tomorrow.